today, finding out, speaking with you, finding out why that is not happening. And I hope to make the case to convince you that this is a serious issue that needs to be addressed. I know there's other agencies that are involved with these wood boiler emissions, the Department of Environmental Conservation, the EPA, and they have taken action. But today, there are still thousands of people suffering from these emissions from wood boilers. Now, I've tried to do some research into this issue, and for those of you who are not familiar with it, basically Section 302.6 deals with exhaust vents. And it says pipes, ducts, etc. shall not discharge gases, smoke, odors, or particulate waste directly upon adjacent property. So my neighbor's boiler shouldn't be polluting my property in the air that my family breathes. And I guess there's some, there's key words in any phrase. To me, the key word is shall not discharge, okay? When I look at that phrase right there in that section, my air should not be polluted by my neighbor. Now, my code enforcement officer, he looks at the word directly. He's trying to say that, oh, your neighbor's exhaust from that boiler is not pointing directly at your house. Well, I don't have to be standing directly in front of a shotgun to be injured by its blast. And I would also like to point out this issue of directly, okay? There's horizontal, 360 degrees, okay? Now there's a section of the code, I believe, Mechanical Code 303.6 says heating and cooling equipment and appliances shall be installed in accordance with manufacturer's installation instructions. Which, if you read the installation instructions, most of these boilers have boilerplate language in their instructions. And that's to put in there by their law firms to alleviate them of any responsibility when one of these things are installed incorrectly and there is a lawsuit by a neighbor. And the language usually goes something like this. Be considerate of your neighbors. Consider building prevailing winds. Wood boiler exhaust vent may be directly pointed, may not be directly pointed at a nearby residence, but prevailing wind will carry emissions directly to the nearby residence. Okay. Now, in addition, it's been well documented that these boilers cause problems. And there is a professional association called the Hearth, Patio, and Barbecue Association. And back in July 2006, they sat down with their members, the wood boiler manufacturers, and they came up with this document, which is included when an owner purchases any of these wood boilers. And it's included with the instructions. And it says, furnace should be located no less than 100 feet from any residence not served by the furnace. So it's the professional association that these things are dangerous and they shouldn't be within 100 foot of a nearby residence not served by the boiler. This has been their accepted language since 2006. The boiler in question is 30 feet away from my property line, probably 60 feet away from my residence. Again, researching this, I found out that Section 302.6 was actually predated by Section 301.8 back in 1978. Coincidence there. Just after the oil embargo, energy crisis, many people started putting in wood-fired devices to lower their heating costs. Previous to Basic Property Maintenance Code 1978.
Okay.
There's no discussion of this language.
That's good. Bye.
Now, one of the things that I contacted the ICC, and I'm trying to find out what is the intent of section 302.6, because intent is very important with a code. And they were somewhat vague on it, but they did send me this commentary. And it said, the third item, health and safety problems created by exhaust that contain hazardous or potentially hazardous discharge, okay? So that is a key criteria. Now, earlier this year, the New York State Department of Health Bureau of Toxic Substance Assessment released this report dated January 2013. And in their conclusions, they say that these devices discharge elevated particulate matter 2.5. 2.5 means it's 2.5 microns. It's so small that if you breathe these particles in, they get in your lungs, you can't exhale them. Are reported at residences near outdoor wood boilers, and they were also accompanied by elevated levels of other wood smoke components, which when inhaled as a mixture, may have conveyed greater and more varied health risks than would be expected from inhalation of PM 2.5 alone. It goes on to say, given the severity of adverse health effects associated with elevated wood smoke and PM 2.5 air concentrations, and the demonstrated importance of OWBs as major sources of wood smoke and PM 2.5 in some residential settings, further efforts to reduce exposure to outdoor wood boiler derived wood smoke and PM 2.5 are warranted. It goes on to say, this reinforces the need for interventions when wood boiler smoke exposures reach levels high enough to elicit complaints. Now, one of the problems with these wood boilers, and again, I want to go back to this issue of the direction, okay? There's not only a 360-degree direction, as my code enforcer officer likes to, escape this issue by saying, well, you got a dryer vent on the side of your house. Your neighbor can call me up and complain that the dryer vent pointing towards his house. Well, the dryer vent is probably putting out some water vapor, maybe a little scent of, fabric softener, but that's it. Nothing that's going to affect your health. So the big issue with the ventilation of these wood boilers is in the vertical aspect, okay? And in a document that was put out by NESCOM, it's the Northeast States Coordinated Air Management Unit, they said that these boilers emit hundreds or even 1,000 times more fine particulate matter. Wood smoke also contains organic pollutants associated with incomplete combustion of wood. The toxic air pollutants that can result from this include benzene, formaldehyde, dioxin, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, all of which can cause cancer. The long-term effects of large numbers of people using inefficient, unregulated wood boilers are increased healthcare costs and unnecessary early deaths. Now, what is a wood boiler? I mean, there are outdoor models, there are also indoor models.
Sir,
Yeah.
I'd like to ask you if you could conclude your comments.
Okay.
And if you have written material that you'd like to present to the Code Council, certainly would ask you to give it to Mark and our code development staff, and we'll make sure to get that to them.
Okay. All right. I just want to say that because of these things burn wood inefficiently, okay, the exhaust does not go up. Hot air goes up. The discharge from these boilers typically goes down to ground level. Therefore, it directly impacts nearby residences. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
That's all the speakers that I have.
Okay.
Except those pertinent to the MRI.
Yes, there are other representatives who will be speaking on some of the more restrictive standards in the next agenda item, and we have moved those to those agenda items. So with that, let's move on to agenda item number 4, more restrictive local standards. We have 3 standards to be considered by the council today. First is the Town of Ulster, Local Law 7 of 2012. The second is the Town of New Windsor, Local Law 6 of 2012. And finally, the Village of Mastic Beach, Local Laws 3, 4, and 5 of 2013. We're going to take these separately. So we will begin with the Town of Ulster, Local Law number 7 of 2012. Mark, would you like to introduce the agenda item?
Yes, again, local law number 7 of 2012, the Town of Ulster. The town had previously submitted a petition for this issue last year, which was rejected by the Code Council at their June 2012 meeting. It was denied because the council at that time found that the petition did not establish special conditions to justify varying the uniform code. It did not conform to accepted engineering and fire prevention practice. This current petition contains more detail regarding specific fire alarm system requirements and how these requirements may be more restrictive than the uniform code. A sample of what they're asking for is there's a language in the local law that requires all multiple family dwellings, both new and existing buildings, to have smoke detectors that become part of a fire alarm system. Including 1 detector for each common hallway, storage areas exceeding 50 square feet, and it requires that they all be connected to a central station monitoring facility that will be required to be located within New York State. There's also language that requires all buildings used for commercial purposes, both new and existing buildings, with occupancy of 50 or more people, to have smoke detectors and automatic fire alarm system, also connected to a central station monitoring facility, also required to be located within New York State. I received an email from the town supervisor yesterday that said that the town will not be sending anyone to speak. And the only thing I can add is also the special conditions that, the one that was given that I could get out of the petition, is that the town anticipates large-scale multi-family projects, and they would like to have a strong fire alarm code to enforce when that takes place. That's a summary.
Okay. Before we begin discussion, I'll ask members of the council if they have any questions for Mark or our staff. Are there any questions? Mayor Kennedy?
So what makes this situation any more unique than all over this state, that they need to have everything sent to a central station, and that more restrictions than what we already have should be in Ulster County? I don't understand. I don't see the unique need here.
Well, ultimately, that is probably the most significant criterion that you have to decide today, is if the town of Ulster has established special conditions, not necessarily unique, but special conditions as the executive law dictates. So that's part of the discussion, and you know, I think that's the question of the day, frankly. Additional questions for Mark? Is that Mr. Lee?
Yes.
I see your hand only. Okay, there we go.
Sorry,
Mr. Lee.
in the corner. First of all, I just wanted to note that Mr. Sauerwein has joined us here in the New York City office.
Oh, thank you.
Second, my question is in regards to the special conditions. If the the Department of State did not receive any special condition citation. Should we be entertaining this petition to begin with?
Well, all I can say is that they did identify a special condition and that basically said that it's because the town anticipates large-scale multifamily projects in the future. That's the special condition that they gave.
That's not special.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I also notice Mr. Lightfoot is in Buffalo office.
Yes, hello.
Okay, thank you, welcome. Are there additional questions for Mark? Seeing none, let's move on to discussion on the petition. I'll take discussion of the board and or a motion. Discussion. Mr. Sauerwein?
21, please excuse my lateness. I have several issues with the proposal. Based upon their comments that they anticipate some large multifamily construction projects to take place, well, they will serve to get some decent fire alarm regulations in place, and I don't mean to imply that the current fire alarm requirements are not adequate, but I understand their concern. However, I see some basically fatal flaws with the proposal that's put forth. One of the first things that jumps out at me is they have a section that says if somebody can't get there, a key holder or somebody responsible to reset the alarm system or to make the repairs within, I'll say an hour or whatever it says in their proposal, they have the right to disconnect the system, to have somebody come in and disconnect the system. Oh, I caution them, no matter what they do, don't touch that system, because then all of the liability for everything that happens thereafter is theirs, squarely theirs. I believe that was not their intent. They had the best of intentions, but that's just one example. Another example may be where they refer to testing in accordance with the NFPA standard 72, and they say at least annually. You can't have it both ways. Unless 72 has changed, it requires at least a semi-annual test. So that's just a couple of examples why I think this should not move forward on our part. And you know I'm very much of a proponent for MRLSs, but this one needs some work. In addition to that, they have not provided any special circumstances other than the fact that they are expecting some large multifamily projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional discussion.
As I said before, all across the state there's large multifamily constructions, and while it may be unique to their particular community, it's not unique to the state.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
Yes, this is Willie. I'd like to apologize for my tardiness today too, but I'd like to concur with my colleague there. Being with the fire department, that is something that sends a extreme red alarm when you have people disconnecting systems and leaving them until whenever. You know, they don't know when someone may be able to get there and reset that system. So then, you know, in the instance that you may have a false alarm, then you have people that are leaving and find out that it's false. They come back in. The system isn't set because someone doesn't have keys. And then they have a real alarm, and then you have people in danger. So I would have to agree that has to be looked at further, and that's something that would definitely turn me away from voting for that.
Thank you. Additional discussion.
Just to go along with Mr.
Flanagan.
I would make the point that if you're going to disconnect to that system, you're going to have to put a fire watch in that building at that time.
Any other discussion? Does the board want to take any action on this item? Mr. Hankin?
Well, if we don't want the municipality to enforce this local law, we have to take action. Because until we take action, the law can be enforced.
That-
That's correct.
That is correct. The executive law allows a more restrictive local standard to be enforced at the local level as soon as it is enacted, until such time that the code council takes an action for approval or disapproval.
Therefore, I would make a motion, and I'm sure Mr. Hall will correct my language, make sure that it meets the requirement, but I would make a motion based upon the staff memo from Catherine Clark on March 21st, stating there were no special conditions in the application. There is no discussion of any more restrictive local standards listed above conforming to accepted engineering practice. And to the discussion we had here among several members who pointed out that if the local law were to take effect, in some cases it could create more problems than it would solve. I make a motion that the board reject this application and that the municipality not be able to enforce it past today.
I would suggest perhaps that be reworded a little bit, and perhaps the council consider a motion finding that the town has failed to demonstrate that there are special conditions that make it reasonably necessary for the construction standards contained within this local law to be adopted by the code council. The town has failed to establish, and the code council finds that they have not established that these construction standards conform with accepted engineering and fire prevention practices, and accordingly that the code council would decline to approve the construction standards contained within this local law. I will point out the local law seems to contain many provisions that are not construction standards. That's not a matter for the code council to pass on or not pass on. For the purposes of this motion, to decline to approve those portions of the local law that purport to impose construction standards on the ground that no special conditions have been established. Town has failed to show that construction standards conform with accepted engineering and fire prevention practice.
I would accept the language. Proposed by the attorney.
I'm gonna just see if I can summarize that. I believe between Mr. Hankin and the suggestions of Joe, we have a motion for disapproval. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Let's take discussion on that motion.
You got one right here.
Just out.
Mr. Martin?
Based on the comments that Joe mentioned, he kept referring to the construction standards. I've got questions as to how that would apply to the operation and maintenance components of this more restrictive standard that they're trying to propose, where we've pointed out that it is in conflict with provisions of 72.
Are there specific questions that you would like to ask?
Well, yeah, if we go with the recommendation, the recommended language that Joe mentioned, he kept harping on the construction aspect. If we act on that, does the operation and maintenance stuff that's in here become enforceable?
I think what Joe was trying to identify is that there are certain portions of the petition that fall under the purview of the code council because they are technical standards that relate to provisions in the uniform code. There are other provisions that may be administrative or in nature that's not under the purview of the code council. And so this action would only address those technical provisions that relate to the uniform code. Is that correct, Joe?
That's correct. I would say, excuse me, if the section in here, or sections in the local law that are in fact less restrictive than the law, that those sections should be denied on that ground alone. Fortunately, there's a relatively long local law with many provisions, a breakdown provided by the town as to which provisions they are submitting for approval and which provisions. In the letter, there are identified several. And try to go through on a line-by-line basis and approve or disapprove of those would be a rather time-consuming process. But if somebody wants to take a stab at it, that would be fine. And I apologize for that motion that I just tried to enunciate, not being as clear as many that Mr. Flanagan normally
I think that job needs to go back to them rather than us plow through it.
But as Mr. Hankin points out correctly, that as long as the Code Council is considering this application, the town is free to continue to enforce this the construction standards.
Okay, let's continue with discussion, additional discussion. Mr. Higbee.
Just to carry out something that Joe was just talking about, is given that this is the second time the town has come to the council, and they've gone back, they've resubmitted, possibly no success here. Is there any reason to be more specific in saying there are no special conditions, that the special conditions that we've inferred from the petition don't merit consideration because they're widespread around the state? My point being, is there a value to being more specific with just that point, not getting into all the particular code sections that may or may not be more restrictive, just so they have some guidance to understand why it got turned down, if that happens to be the case.
The statute is written in the affirmative. It says the Code Council shall approve a more restrictive local standard if it finds that it is more restrictive, that there are special conditions that justify the more restrictive local standard, and that the standard conforms with accepted engineering and fire prevention practices. So if the Code Council finds those three items, it should approve it. If it does not find any one or more of those three items, then it should disapprove. The difficulty I have is the fact that this local law contains provisions that are not really the type of construction provisions that Section 373 of the Executive Law contemplates come to the Code Council for approval or disapproval. It's hard to articulate without going through the local law on a line-by-line basis whether this is approved or not approved, approved or not approved. I think that to the extent that it is a section that should come to the Code Council for approval, the fact that the Code Council finds that there are no special conditions alone would justify disapproval of that provision.
I understand that. The special conditions being really one of the key issues there, which could be answered fairly simply. And the reason I bring it up is I think we see this time and again from other municipalities where a petition comes to us, we find that there's not enough information, it goes back, the law continues to be enforced, it comes back to us with not much change, and perhaps the problem here is that the municipality doesn't have any guidance as to what constitutes special conditions. Even though I know staff does a good job reviewing these.
If this motion passes, motion for disapproval, we will make sure to identify to the town with some specificity the issue of special conditions and how they did not meet the burden that the executive law contemplates.
So it doesn't need to be in a motion?
I don't think it does. It certainly could be if you wanted to, but we would do that anyway.
Ron, I'm sorry, you said you feel there need not be a finding with regard to
the finding, the motion includes a finding. this would be, we would identify to the town in more detail the issue of special conditions and how they had not met that burden. Additional discussion? Any additional discussion? Seeing none, we'll take a vote on the motion for disapproval. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Joe, would you like to say something?
I would like to say this on behalf of one of my colleagues in the Office of Counsel here at the Department of State, and that is the Department of State regulates installation or alarm installers. And parts of this local law may touch on areas that are regulated by the Department of State under the general business law. And my colleague encourages the local government that wishes to adopt a law that touches on licensing of alarm installers or qualifications of people who can install alarms to write to her for an opinion letter as to whether or not their local law, that aspect of their local law, is preempted by the state law. So town of Ulster or any other town that has or is considering adopting a local law that deals with the qualifications of people who install alarms are encouraged to write to Whitney Clark, W-H-E-N-E-Y, Clark, no E at the end. Her email address is whitney.clark@dos.ny.gov. Her telephone number is 518-474-6740.
Okay, thank you. I do have a procedural question. I want to ask, who was the seconder of the motion for disapproval? Mr. Flanagan, Mr. Flanagan.
I think he made the motion.
No, Mr. Hankin made the
I'm
motion.
sorry, I stand corrected.
Mr. Flanagan
Thank you.
seconded. Thank you.
Yep, I am.
Okay, next petition, Town of New Windsor, local law number 6 of 2012. Mark, would you like to introduce the petition?
Yeah, this petition is, the Town of New Windsor has a fire prevention code that was approved by the Code Council back in 1992. This petition modifies that previously approved fire prevention code and enhances it somewhat. Also deletes a provision. Some of the highlights of what they're adding to it is that they're requiring existing range hoods of commercial kitchens to be equipped with a fire extinguishing system on all buildings that have commercial kitchens. They're also providing for signage requirements for commercial buildings and industrial buildings that utilize truss-type construction, similar to what we have right now for new construction, but they're requiring that for existing buildings as well. The current fire code has, that was approved in 1992, has a provision that requires fire sprinkler systems in multiple dwelling buildings. They're proposing to delete that from their local law, presumably because we already have that in the uniform code right now, which we didn't back then. Their current fire prevention code has a provision that requires all commercial occupancies to have a fire sprinkler system when they exceed 5,000 square feet. They're raising that threshold from 5,000 square feet to 9,000 square feet. I will point out, though, and this is very important, that this local law was adopted on December 6, 2012, and that we received the petition 40 days later on January 15, 2013, which does not meet the 30-day requirement. And finally, the town notified me and said that they will not be sending anyone to speak.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Mark?
In New York City.
Mr. Lee? Thank you.
Given the incompleteness of this application and the fact that they missed the deadline, does this warrant our discussion and disapproval, or is this something that can be sort of automatically handled by the Department of State?
Joe, could you provide a clarification regarding the submission requirement and how that may impact the council's decisions?
As Mark correctly pointed out, the statute requires a local government to notify the code council within 30 days after they've adopted the local law. There's precious little case law that I'm aware of that deals with the technical requirements of submission of these applications. The one case that was called to the attention of the Department of State by some good citizen many years ago turned on what is my opinion was an even more technical requirement. That was a case that decided that a more restrictive local standard that was submitted by the Village of Mamaroneck and was approved by the Code Council was nevertheless invalid because the petition was submitted to the Code Council by the village attorney and not by the village mayor. And based on that technicality, the court ruled that the more restrictive local standard was not enforceable and dismissed criminal complaints against the village who raised that issue. It's an old case, it's a local case. Whether it would be followed today by this or any other court is an interesting question, but it is the one case that I'm aware of that construes these requirements for submission of these petitions. I could suggest that if we point this out to the town or the village, town in this case, that they may wish to re-adopt the local law submitted on a more timely basis on the theory that even if the Code Council were to approve their local law at this time, in the long run it might be struck down. So I can't predict what a court would do if presented with the same issue once again. I can only tell you the one case that does exist that suggests that these technicalities are taken seriously.
So I would say it's certainly within the authority of the council to deny this petition based upon the fact that it did not meet the statutory submission requirements. If the council does choose to entertain or approve this, the community may find that it is at risk or certainly subject to challenge based upon it. So, Mr. Hankin?
I don't think that it's unique. I think we have in the past rejected some applications based on the fact that they were not timely. So,
that's correct.
I can tell you that under DHCR, out of Poughkeepsie applied for an MRLS. I wrote a letter saying it wasn't done within 30 days. I wasn't on the council, and the council, the then council, rejected it based on the time bar. So it's not new.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none, let's open the petition for discussion by the council. Any discussion on this petition?
Ron?
Mr. Martin?
Yes, putting the time of submission aside and looking at just the merits and the technical aspects of the proposal, I would have concerns that there are some sections in here that could be construed to be actually less restrictive than the Uniform Code, which would cause me concern at that point.
Additional discussion?
In New York City.
Mr. Sauerwein?
Yes, I'll be brief. The intent is good, but I think there's too many poorly or improperly worded sections for this to move forward. And very briefly, they want to change the threshold from 5,000 square feet for sprinklers to 9,000 square feet. Yes, from 5,000 to 9,000. Why not 10,000? You know, what's that based upon? Just a number somebody pulled out of their hat, or is there some rationale? Firewall marking and truss marking. Oh well, my colleagues in the fire service always beat me up about this, but I think that is a folly. Again, great intent, but it's never going to work. As a firefighter, the problem with it is, what about the buildings that are not marked? What do you do there? What about the buildings where the markings are no longer there? Gee, did they take the trusses out, put something else in, or did the markings just fall off? Again, it's a great intent, but there's a better way to handle it in the fire fighting operations. And I think to extend this into firewall marking, well, I've said all I have to say about that. Furthermore, it appears that this would be retroactive for these marking requirements. So, who's going to mark the buildings that are abandoned? Is that going to be the municipality? Is the town of Windsor going to then saddle themselves with that responsibility? That's a rhetorical comment that they should ask themselves. And finally, I do see something that is, I think, difficult, and I think inappropriate, or improper. Let me put it that way, it's improper. Where an automatic extinguishing system is discharged because of a fire or accidentally, you can still cook there for 24 hours without the protection. I'm sorry. That doesn't make sense to me. If the system goes off, especially because of a fire, something wasn't right. You need to stop the cooking and fix the problem. So I think that section would certainly have to go away. I understand they're trying to be friendly to the business owner, particularly the small business owner who has a problem, not put them out of business. They're trying to be friendly. I think they're not going to help them. In the long run, they're going to hurt them, because something happened to create a fire there or a problem, and without the protection, he's going to lose everything. He or she is going to lose everything they have invested. That's my comment on the proposal.
Thank you. Additional discussion? Seeing none, I'm looking for a motion or any intended action from the council on this petition. Mr. Hankin?
Seeing there wasn't many hands up, and seeing this becomes effective as of when they passed it, unless we do something about it, or unless it's time barred, I make a motion that the council reject this application based on the fact that it would receive more than 30 days as required by law.
Okay. Thank you. We have a motion by Mr. Hankin. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second it.
Okay. Second by Mayor Kennedy. Let's take discussion on the motion. Higby?
Is it also reasonable to include a finding that there are no special conditions cited? And I mentioned this because of what I was saying on the earlier petition we reviewed, is that this may come back to us with no special conditions, reenacted as a local law, enforced in that community, and the board will then, the council will then have the goal of saying no with no special conditions. It's sort of a stop, go back, you forgot to say may. I think that if there are two findings, one tiny being the time bar issue and the other being no special conditions cited, that might be more helpful to both the council and the committee.
That is not part of this motion. So if the council wishes to discuss and include a finding, there would be we would need a motion to amend Mr. Hankin's motion. So let's continue discussion. If you'd like to make that amendment,
if I could, really the question I was asking for Joe here is, because it did not meet the time requirement, does that mean we don't, that's not really a finding, that's the first hurdle that it has to pass, it did pass that, and therefore it's denied?
Joe, would you like to
Is
respond to
that a
that?
different finding from no special
It
conditions?
is different, but I think it's sufficient to determine that it was not, that we're not notified on a timely basis, and it's denied on that ground. If this town did wish to re-adopt this and resubmit it, and perhaps at that time present a case for more special conditions, I think they would be free to do so. The fact that we would find at this time, if the code council would find at this time that the town did not establish special conditions with this application, it would not preclude them from making the argument the second time around. So perhaps they haven't made the argument this time, perhaps it would be justified, the code council would be justified in finding that no special conditions have been established. But again, if they were to re-adopt this local law, resubmit it with a more robust petition, a more cogent argument as to the special conditions that they're claiming, then we would have to look at it at that time.
Mr. Higbee?
In light of those comments, then I would, escapes me now, but that request a modification of the motion. Mr. Hankin is inclined to suggest that we include an additional finding of no special conditions cited.
Okay, so there's a motion to amend?
Motion to amend.
Okay, to include.
That's the exact word I was thinking.
To include a finding regarding special conditions. Okay, is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Second by Mr. Martin. Let's take discussion on the motion to amend. Mr. Higbee, would you like to present your case?
Well, the case here, I think, is, as I was saying earlier in the Town of Ulster petition, is that if this comes back to us as a reenacted local law within the time frame, without any special conditions, we'll be reviewing it again and may have that finding. In the meantime, the law will be enforced in that community and if it gets denied a second time, to the detriment of the community. For that reason, I think it might serve the community for the council at this time to say that not only did you not get it here in time, you didn't cite any special conditions, which is a requirement of the MROS standard.
Okay. Mr. Hankin.
Question one, does the community get a copy of staff's memo that the council gets?
Typically not.
Okay. Is there any reason the community couldn't get a copy of the staff memo? Is the staff memo now a part of the public record?
Yes.
Okay, so there's no reason the community could not get a copy of the staff memo if they chose it.
It's a recommendation from
Staff to the council.
To the council. The council is part of the Department of State. It's an internal communication.
Okay.
So let me back a little bit. Is it part of the public record? It's part of what the code council is considering. It's a internal communication of opinion. So whether or not it could be foiled, for example, or otherwise made available to anybody who wanted it, I won't say right now. Let's just say I think perhaps not.
Okay. The second point I was going to make, I would rather not complicate the motion, but I would suggest that staff, when they notify any community that is being rejected for whatever reason, suggest that the community, I'm assuming, and maybe I'm leaving again, but I'm assuming that the minutes of this meeting are part of the public record.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
As we speak, going out into the cloud.
Okay, so that if first of all, if the community wanted to, view this meeting, they could have in real time.
Yes, they could.
And if they want to get a copy of the minutes, I'm sure if they're willing to pay for it, they can get a stenographic copy of their section or however it works.
That's correct.
And I would suggest that you suggest to the communities that they get a copy of the minutes to see the council, some of the council members thinking on their proposed ordinance. so that if they come back, they will possibly incorporate some of those thoughts of some of the more learned members here as to how they should frame their new laws if they want to try and get code council approval. But I, as the maker of the motion, do not feel that we have to go any further past the point where it's time barred because it wasn't submitted in time.
Okay, thank you.
And
Mr.
I'll
Higby?
withdraw my amendment. I'll withdraw my amendment.
Okay. Motion to amend is withdrawn, so we're back to the main motion, which is disapproval based upon not meeting the statutory submission criteria. Let's continue with discussion on the main motion. Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion is carried. Thank you. Next petition, Village of Mastic Beach, local laws number 3, 4, and 5 of 2013. Mark, would you please introduce the petition?
Yes, this is a petition regarding the fire prevention, housing standards, and property maintenance. The village petitioned the code council last year with a similar local law, which was denied by the council at their September 2012 meeting because the council determined that the local law was not submitted within the 30-day time. Current petition was received within the 30-day time frame. The highlights of this local law would require or contains language that requires automatic fire sprinkler systems in all new buildings over 10,000 square feet in area. Also, in existing buildings over 10,000 square feet in area where more than 50% of the building is modified, or existing buildings over 10,000 square feet in area in which there have been an addition. It continues by requiring all commercial buildings that are not subject to any of the other provisions here be equipped with an automatic fire sprinkler system. So in the end, every commercial building will have either a fire sprinkler system or a fire alarm system when they're done. There's language that deals with hazardous chemicals. They require them to be in compliance with appropriate NFPA standards. They don't list the standards or the addition, just that whatever standard that would be appropriate. It just doesn't specify. It contains language that regulates LPG equipment and the installation and maintenance of that equipment, and that it shall conform to the rules and regulations of the Chief Fire Marshal and appropriate NFPA standards. There's language in there that requires the minimum ceiling height of habitable space to be 7 feet, and it specifically deletes what is right now in the property maintenance code, an exception that in effect allows a lower ceiling height and habitable space for those areas that have been constructed at a time where there was no requirement or the requirement was less than 7 feet. It modifies the property maintenance code requirement for the height of grass. The property maintenance code has it at 10 inches and it lowers it to 8 inches. We have 2 people from the Village of Mastic Beach present. Andrew Brofman, he's Chief Fire Marshal, and Timothy Broger, Village Administrator. They're here to answer any questions. They have elected not to speak unless they were questioned by the Code Council. And I will add that they have provided special conditions that they believe apply to the Village of Mastic Beach, including a statement that says almost all the commercial buildings are on small lots in close proximity to each other, that there are nearly 65% of the commercial buildings are vacant. There's also some statements in there that talk about half of the rental homes are owned by absentee landlords that fail to maintain their properties. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Members of the council, if you have any questions for Mark, or if you have questions from the representatives of the village, I'd like to entertain those questions now. Any questions? Mr. Sauerwein?
Ron, I just want to point out, there's a young lady here who wanted to speak on this. She didn't know she had to register. I'll let her speak for herself.
Okay, hi, my name is Maura Sperry. I'm a director with the Mastic Beach Property Owners Association. We own 6.5 miles of the waterfront, 2 marinas, a clubhouse, and we are a not-for-profit that has been taking care of this waterfront for over 85 years. I just want to make a few points that when they originally were suggesting and making this village, they said they ran on and were adamant about enforcing the existing codes better, that they were not going to change any codes. Currently, there are numerous allegations against code enforcement that they're using their authority to go after Section 8 and government-subsidized renters, as well as their adversaries, while giving preferential treatment to their friends and family. They are currently being investigated by the Suffolk County DA for Sandy and the appropriations of money over Sandy. And also, again, nepotism. We have a big problem with that. I also like to point out that they illegally deputized and armed code enforcement officers after Irene, which is problematic, which I believe what they're doing now, they want to have armed fire marshals, which we are very against. I want to point out that they also have in this where they are kind of attacking the Phragmites, calling it tall grass. These are protected wetlands with Phragmites. They're not tall grass. These are Phragmites. You're not allowed to cut them. The DEC doesn't allow it. We are a wetlands community, so to talk about making the code go from 8 inches to 12 inches based on a fire that was a fire in the wetlands in Phragmites, I think is wrong. The village attorney, Brian Egan, at the last public meeting, and the public meetings claimed that these code changes were going to be minimal. I believe it's a 100-page document. I don't see that as being minimal. This is not, I think before allowing any new laws, we have to see if they can learn to properly enforce the existing laws. And although Mr. Brozier is the village administrator and chief code enforcement officer, he has never been appointed, which is required under the village law, as the chief building inspector, which he goes around saying he is, but he has never been appointed. According to any of the minutes we can find, they are against open meeting laws, missing minutes. They're also not honoring FOIL requests, and they are not following the basic accounting practices as they've adopted for the New York State Controller's Office. We have asked for an audit. And as far as the fire marshal and having a whole new advisory board, we don't feel it's necessary. We all pay a $600 per year fire tax for our fire district, which has chiefs and commissioners. We don't feel it's necessary to have armed fire marshals in our village where there's already an issue with people being harassed by the code enforcement, which goes around in police-looking cars, wearing police-like uniforms. So we'd like you to please not, at this point, let this petition go through at all.
Are there any additional questions? What I would like to remind the council that we have a specific petition before us, and with respect to the comments that were made before, it's important that we keep focused on the subject of this particular petition. Thank you. Additional questions?
Ron, could we get that speaker's name, address, email to us, please?
Yes. Ma'am, the person who just spoke, could you give us your name and your address so that we can include that in the record?
Absolutely. It's Maura, M-A-U-R-A. Last name is Sperry, S as in Sam, P as in Peter, E-R-Y, I'm at 5 Hemlock Drive in Mastic Beach.
Thank you.
We got that?
Telephone number or email?
Could you
Sure,
give us an
that's
email
great.
address?
Yep, it's my first name,
Can
Maura.
I suggest that you send that directly to Mr. Auerbach and not announce it here at the meeting?
Good idea.
Absolutely. That would be fine, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have additional questions? Okay. Mr. Batter?
On the last two petitions, there was some discussion about whether the petitioner established special circumstances. And forgive me for being very new to this, and my mayor being very new to this, but what's the threshold standard for a special circumstance? Where do we, what is it something, I'm looking for the test for a special circumstance, I guess, would be the appropriate question.
The language is not all that specific. Essentially, the litmus test for establishing special conditions is that there is a condition that exists or conditions that exist within that particular community that warrant the council's approving a standard that is higher or more restrictive than the standard that is applied across the state. And that may not give you all that much to go with, but that's generally
I just want
that's
to
generally the case.
wrap my head around that a little bit.
Joe, if you'd like to
Welcome to the
elaborate.
club. The uniform code is, as the name implies, intended to be uniform across the state. The statute allows and recognizes the fact that within a local government, within a particular jurisdiction, they may say, okay, that's fine as a basic level of protection across the state, but because of special circumstances, special conditions that exist in our community, we feel that we should have some standard that's a little bit higher, perhaps a lot higher, than the general rule applies across the state. So the statute doesn't elaborate beyond that, but it's just what exists within this community, what physical conditions or other conditions exist within this community that say we should have a standard here that is higher than the statewide average.
It was just, when numbers get thrown around and this is different from someplace else, you start to do that balancing kind of test. And forgive me, that's my attorney training mixing with the fire department training mixing with.
This is a question we've been debating for many years. This is not new, so. Okay, let's take discussion on the motion, or no motion yet. Let's take discussion on the petition, excuse me. Mr. Higbee.
One of the things mentioned in the petition is that this village, formerly part of the town of Brookhaven, had the Brookhaven more restrictive local standards enforced for many, many years. And in looking through the work by Mr. Auerbach, which I found excellent preparation, I was trying to find out whether there was a departure from those provisions that Mastic Beach is trying to put in force. Is that something we could ask now?
Would you like to ask a question to Mike?
Yes, in fact, let me be a little more explicit here.
Would you like me to go to the podium, or can I answer it from here?
Here's fine.
Okay, the special conditions that are different, in my opinion, are the age.
Just speak a little louder.
Okay. Mr. Higbee, could you reiterate your question, please?
Yes, here's the issue for me, is that these requirements have been in force in the village of Mastic Beach for many years, when it was in fact really part of the town of Brookhaven. So by denying this petition, we would also in effect be denying an earlier approved petition by the town of Brookhaven, if the provisions are the same. So my question was, are the provisions in their petition the same provisions that have been in the town of Brookhaven's approved more restrictive local standards for a number of years?
And my My answer is yes, there are provisions that are the same, but there are some that are different. The 8-inch tall weeds, grass, etc. But I think the representatives from the town might be better able to identify those that are different beyond that one, if that answers it. I mean, I could go in, my memo does elaborate on many of them, but I did not identify and go back to Brookhaven to compare it line for line.
Would you like to ask Representative Simmons to speak?
I think it would be worthwhile. Does anybody else see the reason for going into this in that
Yes,
detail?
I would agree with you. There's a lot of questions.
Okay, I'd like to ask if the representatives from the village of Mastic Beach could come forward and see if you might be able to help to answer the question. Mr. Higbee, I'm going to ask you if you would again reiterate for the representatives' benefit.
An issue for me is we're being asked to consider a petition as if it were brand new, but in fact, it really has been something approved when your village was part of the town of Brookhaven, or incorporated as a village.
It isn't inactive. I can't speak for the fire marshal, but town of Brookhaven code reads.
Sir, if you could just start out by identifying yourself.
Tim Brozier, Village of Mastic Beach, Village Administrator. The town of Brookhaven did have a more restrictive code on fire. They had a more restrictive code on grass, which was 4 inches, but I don't think it was approved by the code council. We are enforcing these codes. We are the boots on the ground, myself and the fire marshal every day out there. So we're trying to enforce these codes that Brookhaven had, and we are trying now to implement. And Brookhaven did have more restrictive codes that are pretty much we mimicked in our code.
When you say pretty much, could you identify specific instances where they're different from the town of Brookhaven code?
I'll let the fire marshal speak on that because it's his code that's in question on the fire code.
Could you identify yourself first, sir?
My name is Carlo Grover. I'm the village fire marshal for the record. Andrew Brockman is no longer with us. So he originally started this, and I'm just kind of taking over where he left off. But Mr. Brockman had petitioned the council for a more restrictive code on the fire alarms because we do have a lot of wood frame structures. They're all close, small lots. Everything is, we have a lot of dwellings where people are living behind them, where there's apartments and stuff like that. So the notification and the fire alarm is a lot quicker if they had fire alarms. But any other questions on fire alarms? Yes, ma'am.
Okay, question, Mayor Kennedy.
So I'm hearing that you were once part of Brookhaven.
Yes, ma'am.
And now you're the village. How long has that separation been?
It's only been 3 years.
3 years.
And we did it, and Mr. Brockman did approach the council, or apply to the council rather, last year, but we weren't within the time frame, so we weren't able to hear it. The difference with the sprinkler in Brookhaven and us is Brookhaven requires 12,000. We're asking for 10,000 on new structures, on new construction. But the fire alarm under Brookhaven's code, we were having a little bit of an issue with enforcing it because we hadn't adopted it yet. So that's where we are here today to adopt it in our code. So.
Mr. Hankin?
I have a question for Mr. Wall. When a municipality like we have here breaks off from a bigger municipality.
That's an excellent question, Mr. Hankin. I was thinking of it myself. I do not know the answer. I do not know if all of the local laws adopted by the town of Brookhaven remain in effect in that portion of the town that is now the village when the village separates. That's a great question, and I do not know the answer.
See, you read my mind.
Yeah, thank you.
Especially those MRLSs that we may have approved for Brookhaven.
Well, especially those, but other, for reasons not applicable in this meeting, a lot of the other questions may be interesting as well. Would it be possible to have a comparison of the local laws that are now being presented to this council to compare them to the existing and approved more restrictive local standards that were approved on behalf of the town by the code council in the past, so that we could see, in effect, what are you asking the code council to change?
Listed in, I believe it's actually listed right in the paperwork. I could get something for you. But I believe we submitted it as a packet. I believe the comparison was there, but.
I'm mumbling, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Do we have additional questions for Mastic Beach before we move back into discussion on the petition? Any additional questions for Mastic Beach? Mr. Henkin?
And I don't know whether you're in a position to do it, or we had the town administrator here?
Village administrator.
Village administrator. Because I'm going, from my perspective, we're faced with a decision. Right now, you can enforce what you have.
Correct.
Okay? I don't feel comfortable making a decision based on the information we have here and some of the questions I have and some of the questions council possibly has. But, so I'd rather not be forced into making a decision today. But I will make a decision today, for myself anyway, if the village isn't willing to commit not to enforce these regulations until the next council meeting, and come back to the next council meeting with answers to the questions we have, and council may have some answers to some of the members have here. So if we can get that sort of commitment.
I can speak on that, on behalf of us and the attorney's office of the village. We are not, at this time, enforcing these codes.
And we haven't been.
And we haven't been until you guys hold
Until you-
So, if I understand.
Yeah, if we can table it.
Tell to commit to the council that you will not enforce this until at least the next council meeting. Yes. Then I would make a motion to table this to the next council.
Okay, I would ask you to amend that to a motion to postpone to the next meeting. Motion to table is not debatable.
You're right. I would make a motion, we postpone this discussion to the next council meeting, and in the interim, the village is committing to get us additional information. Council hopefully will be able to get us some additional clarification, and we'll be able to move forward at the next council meeting.
Okay, there's a motion to postpone to the next meeting. Is there a second to the motion? Second by Mr. Higbee. Let's take discussion on the motion to postpone to the next meeting. Joe, did you have a comment that you wanted to make?
My only suggestion was if the village would get together with the code division folks and to have a list comparing the existing and approved more restrictive local standards in the town, and compare them to the more restrictive local standards that the village is now presenting, that would be very helpful.
That's exactly what I wanted to ask.
I read your mind as well.
You did.
Mr.
I
Martin?
want to see it lined up side by side. What are we doing? What are we actually doing? Because this is very hard to figure out.
Mr. Martin?
I would add one more variable to that, and that would be more universal. My question being the applicability of more restrictive local standards that were approved by the council prior to subsequent additions of the codes. Because we know that as we've adopted new generations of the code, new iterations of the uniform code, certain previously approved standards are no longer necessary, nor sometimes now they come in conflict with the existing code. I don't think we've ever gone back to square one. It started that process across the state, but I think that's a good one to hear. I'd like to see the comparison to what was in place in the town of Brookhaven at the time of separation, and also compare what you want to do here to the uniform code as it sits today. Because you may find certain things are no longer necessary.
Well, yeah, with the uniform code, that was one of the issues too, is as it states in uniform code, if you have it, it doesn't work, you can take it out. And a lot of people want to take it out. They want to get rid of it entirely.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
The uniform code right now does say that if you have it, it has to work, fire alarm. And if it doesn't work, you can take it out. And we are faced with a lot of people that want to take it out. They think that they don't need it. Commercial, not residential.
Mr. Goldwater, what we're talking about, I think that they should come back and come to the Department of State and go over a few things in there, because there are some things in here that are put in here at discretion of the fire marshal when it indicates that that's what he thinks it should be rather than what the code says it should be.
Right.
So it gives that variance situation through here, and in many sections it's like that, which would not be acceptable to this council, I'm sure.
Mayor Kennedy, did you want to speak?
That sets up that situation where now you're my friend, I let it go, you're not my friend, I come after you. That's where we get into all kinds of village and town arguments and problems. So it has to be uniform across the board.
That's why I agree with Mr. Martin, that we gotta see what is enforced by the one area, because it's so good in these other areas.
Additional discussion on the motion to postpone to the next meeting. Mr. Sauerwein?
Just a question, Mr. Peister. I did want to make two comments and ask one question, but not directly on the motion. So do you want me to hold that, or do I have to do that before we postpone it?
Let's, if they're not relevant to the motion, let's discuss the motion, and then I'll be happy to recognize you after that.
Thank you.
Okay, let's continue discussion on the motion to postpone. Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion to postpone to the next meeting, signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Sauerwein, did you have a point that you wanted to make?
Well, first I'd like to ask the fire marshal a question. And maybe it's not fair to ask him because he's coming into the situation a little bit later than his predecessor. But I noticed the threshold for sprinklers is to be 10,000 as opposed to 12,000, which I believe was in the old Brookhaven code. Is there some particular reason that 10,000 square feet was chosen rather than 5,000 or any other figure?
I would have to ask my predecessor.
Okay, as I said, it may not be fair to ask you that question because I don't know exactly when you came into the process, but that is a question that would beg for an answer at some point. And I would like to make two other comments on the code in general. Oh, wait a minute, first thing, let me get something straight. Mastic Beach is still in the town of Brookhaven. It's no longer governed under the town board, it is its own entity, but as a long time, from 1953, resident of the town of Brookhaven in general, I'm very proud to have Mastic Beach as part of our great town. So they're still part of the town of Brookhaven, but they are now doing their own governing right in the village itself. But I spent 27 years working in the enforcement of codes in the town of Brookhaven, and a significant amount of that was spent in the fire marshal's office, so I spent a lot of time working on the codes there. They weren't bad, in my opinion. They weren't bad. They're far from perfect. Many of the changes that were made early on were prior to the implementation of the New York State Uniform Code, certainly prior to the ICC-based codes that we use now in New York State. But the village is in a very unique situation, and it's an opportunity that they should consider. Part of the problem that I recognized with the town's fire prevention code was that many things were no longer needed, and there were some conflicts there, especially as we got into the ICC-based family of codes. And at one time, I actually considered and had some preliminary conversations with elected officials about a total rewrite of that town code to try to address those issues. I'm going to be very honest with you. It just was too much of a job for somebody who was 2 years away from retirement. I never pursued the issue. But the village of Mastic Beach is now in a situation where they could avoid those pitfalls that I fell into. You'll have a situation now and it's not easy work, that's for sure, but you have a situation where you can look at the uniform code, look at the town code, and I'm still proud to say that my name was affixed to that fire prevention code for a significant number of years, but look at that and again, look at the uniform code, including the property maintenance code, building code, residential code, all those codes, fire prevention code. Look at those codes and then identify what areas you think you really need to ask for an MRLS. I think the village is to be commended for trying to address the problem of a 65% vacancy rate in the commercial properties. I know, just by listening to the fire radio, there's a lot of fires in Mastic Beach, and they're trying to address that situation. And I think the village should be commended for that action, but I think this is an opportunity for the village of Mastic Beach to whittle down some of the many pages of codes that they think that they need. If they're given an opportunity to look at the existing codes, particularly the uniform code, I think you will see that the number of more restrictive local requirements that you are looking for is going to be substantially reduced. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is all I have to say about that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sarowine. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, that completes agenda item 4. Number 5, next uniform code and energy code adoption update. Just a brief update for all of you on where we are with the ongoing updates to the uniform code and the energy code. As you know, we have developed rulemaking documents to update the commercial provisions of the energy code based upon the 2010 edition of ASHRAE 90.1. Those documents are essentially ready to go to the governor's office for pre-publication review. We are waiting for a report from the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, PNNL, that is essential to the documents and justification for this particular update to the energy code. Once we receive that report, and we're hoping to receive it soon, we will then be forwarding rulemaking documents to the governor's office for review. And hopefully we'll have an update for you on that at our September meeting. Maybe even have some action for the council to take at that time. We'll keep you apprised as that continues. As for the uniform code update, we are continuing to review some of the information that has come in on a couple of key issues that have been discussed by the council before. We understand that you're still waiting for the report of the Residential Code Technical Subcommittee. We're hoping that we'll be able to present that to you at our September meeting. But again, we're reviewing a lot of information that has come in on that. We also have some additional information that's come in on the gas station fire suppression systems presented in the testimony today. So we should have an update for you by our September meeting on that as well. Does anybody have any questions? Mr. Lee?
When you receive the PNNL documentation, will we be able to see that as well?
The PNNL report will essentially become part of the rulemaking documents, so we will certainly share that with the Code Council.
Okay, and then are you do you have a good idea of what the findings of the report are going to be? And I guess where I'm going with this question is that, is there potentially any findings within that report that could either disrupt the process or nullify anything that we have proposed in the Energy Code update?
We do not know what the findings of that report will be. We're not really sure. We're very hopeful that whatever is in there will not disrupt the process. We're hoping to be able to use that report as part of the justification for the rulemaking and proceed with forwarding the information to the governor's office. If that is not the case, then we may have to come back to the Code Council for some additional discussion and or direction.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Mayor Kennedy?
And I'm new, so I'm asking lots of questions. But
Please do.
On this fire suppression system that they're talking about, in the testimony that I heard today, I heard from basically people who sell or represent these systems, who would have a financial stake in keeping them in place. I haven't heard from anybody else, or I'm assuming that there's some technical background to this that the council is doing that would say there's a reason why you're suggesting to change this. I know that one of the things that as this state is moving forward, we're trying to figure out how to have less mandates, have less business restrictions. New York is a state known for just regulating itself out of business. So I want to really understand why we might be saying we don't need these particular systems in place, because I want to look at that from a more, I want to use unbiased point of view versus somebody who sells systems.
Okay. Well, just for your information, when the Code Council began the update that we're in the process of now, and the update that we're talking about is to essentially rewrite the provisions of the codes of New York State that are incorporated by reference into the Uniform Code, based upon the 2012 editions of the International Codes. These are the national codes that are published by the International Code Council. The Code Council appointed a series of technical subcommittees, each of which was presented with one or multiple codes, asked to review those codes and present recommendations to the Code Council regarding how the council should utilize those resources in adopting an update to the Uniform Code. And the technical subcommittee that reviewed the International Fire Code, the 2012 International Fire Code, has presented a recommendation to eliminate this provision based upon the fact that this provision has not existed in the international codes. This is something that was, for lack of a better term, a holdover from the Uniform Code that had been maintained up until 2003 when we adopted the international code. So this was a discussion that happened at the technical subcommittee level. I know that there were debates that occurred within the technical subcommittee. We've received information that is in support of eliminating the provision. We've received some information opposing, as some of which you heard today. So there's a greater body of information and we will certainly make sure to bring you and Mr. Batter up to speed on all of the information that you've got. It's a lot of information. It's pretty voluminous, but there's a lot there, and we can certainly walk you through that so that you can understand what information we have, what discussions have ensued, and hopefully that will help you to prepare.
Small chunks at a time. But it does sound like you're trying to streamline things a little bit from the years of various codes by looking at the international standards.
Well, that was one
Is
of
that
the.
my interpretation?
That was one of the primary reasons that the state chose to adopt the international codes or utilize the international codes as a basis for our state codes to create a level of consistency with other states that were in jurisdictions that were adopting and to utilize the national process. Okay. Mark, I'm sorry.
I think you covered. I did want to add that we do have letters in support and against the fire suppression system. I'm just holding until it becomes the time for the code council to act on something like that, in which case I would get it out to the code council before they would meet at that time.
Okay. We'll do that in a second. Thank you. Any other questions on the uniform code and the energy code updates? Okay. Thank you. Mark, could you just give us a review of the meetings we have coming up in the future?
Yeah, as part of your packet, I included a new notice of the 2013 meetings of the Code Council. It includes the February 13th meeting, today's July 16th meeting, and the future meetings for 2013 on there is included. The next one is September 11th. And the last scheduled one would be December 11th of this year.
All right. Thank you. And then finally, any other business? Mark, you've got one thing, just to make sure folks know. Could you talk about the news a little bit?
Yeah, the code enforcement officials that are present today that are seeking to receive credit for being present here have to complete this this registration for this this session here, and if you haven't done so, please come up after the meeting and you can fill it out at that time.
Okay. For those individuals who are either in Buffalo or New York City who wish to receive in-service credit for code enforcement official certification, please let us know. We'll have to get that information from you. I see Mark Schwartz is in New York City, so we have a couple there. So if you're interested in that, please contact Mark, and we'll make sure to take care of that. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Any other business to come before the council? Mr. Hankin?
It's not council business, but I think council should know about it. And Joe had mentioned earlier, Paul had mentioned earlier about our sister agency under the Department of State, the Department of Division of Licensing, and how it affects.
Division of Licensing Services, yes.
Yeah, Division of Licensing Services. We're always concerned, at least I, as one of the private business people here on the council, and the mayor brought up a very good point about New York being friendly. We're always concerned about, one of the things I'm concerned about is the cost of housing, okay? And I don't know whether you realize it, but on June 12th, and I just picked up on it, and I called Mark and he verified, because he called over the Division of Licensing to see if I was reading it right. The Division of Licensing licenses fire installs, fire system installers, I don't know what the proper...
Fire alarm.
Fire alarm installers. If any of you have ever seen a smoke detector put in a house, in a new home, you realize that the electrician wires the smoke detector. It can literally hang there on the wires and it'll work. Okay, and this is done by an electrician, whether that electrician is licensed, depending on the community, or unlicensed, it's done by an electrician. The Division of Licensing came out with a regulation which says that whoever puts the 2 screws in that fastens that smoke detector to the box has to be licensed, not the person wiring it. Not the person wiring it, but the person that puts the 2 screws in. And anybody here at the table could put the 2 screws in. The same electrician that puts the fixture up with 2 screws has to be licensed. Based on that, the town of Poughkeepsie, where I live, came out, and this is the package you now have to fill out when you want to put in a smoke detector in a new house. Plus, there is a $50 fee plus a $2 per device fee for the inspection of the two screw, you know. All right, now, why the division of licensing, or where they came up, and who put the pressure on the division of licensing? Because the employees there, I'm sure, didn't dream this up themselves. It probably came through some fire suppression business, I'm guessing, I'm assuming. So to the extent that you speak to your sister agencies under the Department of State, you might want to mention something about increasing the cost of housing for something I think is ludicrous. Now, I don't know how the rest of the council members here feel, but that is as of 2012, June 2012.
Okay, Mr.
Bob,
Flanagan?
what happens if I want to put one in myself?
I don't think you can. Well, first of all, this is new housing, so it's gotta be, you gotta get a CO. To get a CO, you gotta make sure that the license, you gotta fill this out to get a CO, and you gotta make sure that the licensed buyer guy is installing it. I mean, you know, I don't know. According to this, you can't literally do it.
In other words, if I put an addition on my house.
Right.
And do it all myself, and my sons, grandsons, and everything come in and help me, and I wanna put the smoke detector
You
in,
want a CO?
I can't do it.
You want a CO? You can't do it.
Oh, Jobs would be better.
So I'm up on that ladder doing it myself, I can tell you that right
Well, you
now.
won't get a CO. According to this, you shouldn't get a CO.
Okay. Point taken. We'll take a look at that. We'll talk with people in the Division of Licensing, and we'll present some information or report to you back at the September meeting. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Okay. Any other business? Okay, before we adjourn, one person I failed to mention at the beginning of the meeting, a new face, is Mark Blanca. As you know, Ray Andrews has retired, and I know Mark has talked with him. A few people have seen him, and it sounds like Ray is thoroughly enjoying his retirement. I think he actually may be in England right now, if I'm not mistaken. So
Last night he arrived in England.
yeah, so which is great to hear. But I also would like to welcome Mark to the Code Development Unit. As big as shoes as Ray's are to fill, literally and figuratively. I have every confidence that Mark and Mike are going to continue to serve the council well, and so I want to, on behalf of the council, welcome you to the table.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. And seconded, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.